Can you hear me?
Yes. Good.
And me?
I can hear you too. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Is my face and M showing up the right direction?
I like the background. Kate's background.
That was just lucky. I don't know why it's there.
Oh, you didn't put it there?
I don't remember doing it, but I guess I did.
So yeah, everybody's work is great, and that's it.
Good night. It is. It's a good show.
Been very glad to see it, or get to work on it.
Yeah.
There we go. You, yeah, ask Heather. And I helped put up this wonderful show. I'm super excited in putting it online. So, and I picked all the panelists, and I'm very excited to have you all. It looks fabulous, and I'm super excited to talk to you more about it. And yeah, so we can just go into it. Stephanie, if you want to click on the view exhibition. This is like magic. Yes, so this is our website. So we did two versions of the show. We wanted it to be fully experienced virtually and also fully experienced in person. So actually all the pieces can be seen in both locations, which I think is really, really interesting. So just to go over a little bit of call and response. Call and response is an annual exhibit of collaborations between writers and visual artists in which one calls and one responds. The result is a dynamic set of paired works of words and artistic media that resonate and speak to contemporary issues. This theme for Call and Response 2020 is structures. So our prompt was from Heather and Jay. Carrier, what architecture will you create in this work? How will form and meaning support one another? What is the use or the imperative of any structure? On what will your structure rest? And then some of the ideas were considering bone structures, organic structures, network structures, scientific structures, and tree structures. And another question, as our society reckons with structural inequalities and structural racism in particular, how do we as artists and writers unstruct, destruct, and instruct, and eventually help construct new systems on new foundations? So with that, I want to start asking our panel, and I guess we'll go through and hopefully have you all introduce yourselves when I prompt you for a question, and then Stephanie can show your work. A lot of us have video work. Jessica and Jorge in particular have video work, so I'm hoping we can play that, and you can all experience it if you haven't already, because the videos are awesome and you should watch them multiple times, so that is okay. So I guess to go start off with our, oh, Stephanie, did you want to show some of the work, or we'll just start with the questions? I think that's what yeah, because we had seen some of the work. I'll just do that. Okay, I'm answering my own question. Okay, so to start off, so many of us have done this a few times, and then a couple of us are new to it. So I was wondering how the experience has been different since we were all prompted virtually this time versus like an in-person meeting. Did you find it any more difficult or actually easier to do now that we kind of, I don't think we even really, when we were prompted, knew that we would have a physical show. So I'm just interested in someone who participated last year or the year before versus this year. So Kate.
Hi, I'm Kate Fitzpatrick, and this is my third time participating in Call and Response. And this time was a little bit different because we're under the pandemic conditions, and it was difficult. Normally, you use the time in the beginning to kind of actually meet in person and talk face to face with the person that you're matched with. And there was just no opportunity to do that. And I think with the addition of like added stressors at home and working from home and parenting, 24/7, it didn't leave a lot of room for people, for at least in my case, to have space to kind of interact with my person. So we spent time going back and forth on email a few times. And the interesting thing that happened was that even though I was a responder, there were several exchanges going back and forth where I was getting a poem, and then I responded to the poem, and then I was responded back to with different work. So that engagement was really nice to have that back and forth, almost like call and response happening again and again.
That's so good. And actually, Kate is graduating this semester.
That's right.
So how did that have to do, did that affect how you responded this year even more? And can you talk about your piece? Because your piece is brand new and something a little different, I think, than usual. Stephanie, do you want to click on her? Yeah, there we go. Magic.
Yeah. So this, and that's also another thing that affected my work. So right now, I do have my MFA thesis show titled Liminal Glyphs. It's in the Fenwick Gallery in the School of Art. And usually I work really big, almost installation and huge paintings. So this one is actually a drawing on multiple layers of vellum. And that way of working came to fruition because of the pandemic. I couldn't go to my studio anymore. I had to kind of change the way that I was working. So this is 3 layers of vellum with ink in between each layer, layered on top of each other. And they kind of, whichever way you want to look at it, it's kind of a couple of concentric circles, which are the structure. But then in the center, the structure is either coming together or breaking apart, however you want to look at it. So that was the way I kind of came to the work, having completed some of the really larger pieces in the MFA show, and then also kind of finding a space at home to work amongst family.
Yes, and we can hear your baby in the background, like a lot of us with our children. Did anybody else want to chime in that had worked before? And a lot of us are working at home. That's another good point with children. How are you guys juggling that? I know a lot of us are doing different strategies. Jessica, I know you have several children at home and you're teaching. How have you been balancing?
I mean, I think we've spoken before, and you know that I feel like I'm thriving in this environment because I'm such an extreme introvert and I prefer everything to be online. And I think I'm also somebody within this group who I've been in call and response a couple of times as an artist, once as a poet, and I've also had your job as the moderator for the panel.
Yes, you moderated the first one I did, so
yeah, so I'm with you. You're doing awesome. This is really great. But I think the experience now, I think, connected really quickly with Marciello, and we knew right away, that we wanted to tackle structures of oppression and how to dismantle them in the work that we were going to do for this show. So I think we connected right away and we had so much more interaction. I think because we were able to do it online, that we had a lot of really quick back and forth, more than I have ever had
That's great.
participating in this exhibition before.
That's fantastic. And can we play a little snippet of her video, which looks fabulous in the space, but it's so nice to have online too.
Yeah, I'd love for you to play my video. That's great. Do you want to play it, or do you want me to say anything ahead of time, or?
Whichever you.
Go ahead. Good.
So great. Oh, I love it. Can you talk a little bit about what you were thinking? And also too, you run an anti-racist reading group online. So how has that informed your practice, especially now? Have you been thinking about that as you're making work?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I'm always thinking about that. And I think like within academia and with a show in academia, just knowing, just that, for example, at George Mason, one of the structures that I think needs to be dealt with is the fact that only 4% of faculty at George Mason, full-time faculty, are Black. Only 4% of full-time faculty are Black. And I as a part-time, as an adjunct faculty member who is Black, the contrast and having been a student at Mason and never once encountering a Black faculty member as a student there, that's a structure was definitely informing what I wanted to do with this piece. Mm-hmm. And then so this show is just opening, but also this week with the anti-racist reading group, on Friday, we meet from 1 to 2:30. And the topic is Afrofuturism, Otherwise Worlds, and Freedom Dreaming. And so as you can see on the exhibition, in my statement, I quote Ashton Crowley, who's this incredible artist, writer, thinker, who has, these ideas of otherwise visioning. And so the piece that I made was, very much inspired by Ashton Crowley's work, by Adrienne Marie Brown. And I'm always inspired also by the Situationist International. So I have the Venegham quote also here that you see on the screen. But that otherwise visioning, that freedom dreaming is what inspired this video to think about what kind of structure do we want to create? What kind of world do I want to create? And how can envisioning that world bring it about? And so you'll see a lot of joy, a lot of Black women laughing and experiencing bliss and joy in this video, and having a very, Mariciello, when I asked her, what kind of music do you think we should have? What should be here? We were very collaborative in the work that we were doing, both with the writing and in the video, and in every aspect of it. We went, like I said, back and forth so many times, and she said, I think something meditative would be really nice. And so really focusing and meditating on creating that structure of Black joy, of bliss, of women in absolute just pleasure and laughter and joy. That was a huge inspiration for this piece.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much. That was great. Okay, well, thank you. The other thing I loved about this is, right, you can experience the video in person, but also videos transfer so well to virtual spaces. And I guess my next question, and I'll open it up a little bit more, is especially a lot of us who work more physically, did you think about how you would make the work and how it would be experienced if virtually versus, you know, physically. I mean, in the space it does look great, but we had no idea obviously that we were going to be there or not. Jane, can you talk about that? Jane and Carrie, I think you guys have the most kind of physicality pieces.
Sure, I can talk about that. So my name is Jane McCarty-Burke, and I'm a painting MFA candidate. I'll be graduating in the spring, and that's my piece on the screen. It's made of multiple panels, and it's oil on panel. Yeah, I did have the thought that this would not translate well virtually, and I think that's fairly true. It doesn't translate all that well. But I decided just not to worry about that. I just kind of ignored that problem. And I mean, I was working on this before call and response, but then I thought that it would fit really well. And Andy, you also thought that it would fit really well with the theme, which it does.
I love it.
And the thing that you can't really see, and this is what I was talking about with it not translating, I created it by painting in oil first, just black on every panel, and then scratching away with sandpaper. And that's a physicality that you really can't quite read. Even in a detail shot, it does look like it could be charcoal. I think most people would probably assume that it's charcoal on white paper or like on the panel. So anyway, yes, I ran into that problem, but I just kind of chose to ignore it. But maybe Carrie wants to continue.
Sure. Hi, my name is Carrie. I'm a fourth year MFA student in sculpture, planning to graduate in the spring. And I had a similar approach to Jane where I'm like, oh, it's going to be online, but I want my work to have physicality to it because a lot of my work is about the process of making it. And I think that so I used a lot of repurposed fabric that I've collected over years and ran it through a sewing machine. And I wanted to still have that element of like cutting and ripping and going through the machine. And I think online you're able to get a lot closer to the work, which is nice, but you're not able to see as much of the delicateness of it. So that element is kind of lost in an online world. And I feel like what that brings us to is some art can't be translated online. Some of it has to be in person. And coming to that realization that even if we're in an online world, we still have to have that in person is valuable and has value that can never be replaced by technology.
And too, with your piece in particular, we decided to display it in a different way, which I really was excited about. We actually put it inside the library case, kind of like a little bit of a sarcophagus or a coffin or something, you know, you would see at a like an exhibit, a museum, but which I really enjoyed because you work a lot with the idea of death. And can you talk about how that translated when you worked with your poet?
Yes, so I feel like because so much of my work deals with death and fear of dying, we kind of went the opposite way. Let's talk about nature and life. And we wanted to work with something that was important to both of us. And so the natural world and the environment are really what stood out. And so this work I see kind of as an antithesis to my normal work. Like I'm going to bring in color, I'm going to bring in pattern and have it be less about disappearing and more about being in the moment.
Awesome. Yeah, I was really happy when you brought your piece and you know, the color was really bright and it was really interesting because we had so many so many colors or so many pieces that were really monochrome, like black and white, like Jane's and Mike's and Kate's is fairly monochrome, but then yours was colorful and mine is pretty bright and Angela's was bright. So it was a nice way. It's a nice way to move around the exhibition, but also the website then turned out the same way, which was really interesting, especially like the splash page. It's nice to see all the different kind of pieces, and they went together really well under the structure theme.
And I think the structure of the website, like that grid pattern,
yes.
is so perfect. So.
Yeah. That it worked out really well, and I kind of wanted to play off of when I made the image for the exhibition, I played off of Jane's grid pattern. So the fact that we went to a grid pattern with the Mason exhibition page really helped solidify all of that. So yeah, and kind of jumping off the structure theme, I think, Mike, you had like a really interesting story of what your piece was about and how you handled the structure theme and how you worked with your poet. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Mike Walton. I'm probably a fourth year as well, going part-time. But at any rate, Christian and I had a really nice collaborative effort here going. We first started exchanging, works. He would show me some of his writing, and I would show him some of the things that I was working on, and so forth. And at the time, I was, and I still am doing a lot of cyanotypes and so forth. And so in the work itself, there's this perceived structure in some of the imagery and so forth. And one of the things that Christian wrote was this other, not the story that's, or not the poem that's in the show, but another story, small essay, if you will, around ants and so forth. And then we just started talking, having sort of this conversation about ants and structure and so forth. And so then I kind of zeroed in on continuing to use a similar imagery with regard to creating additional cyanotypes and so forth. Made some samples. We kind of shared that. We talked about those a little bit, but then I went back and I showed him one of the sketches, a preliminary sketch of what I would do to create a design before I would actually create the cyanotype. And so the idea was, well, he saw that and said, wow, that's really what he really enjoyed that. And that kind of inspired him to work a little bit deeper into the poem that he created here. So the idea of structure was that we kind of zeroed in on was around the ants and so forth. And so the piece that I have is actually trying to take a similar set of rules or paradigm that I usually work in, which is circles. And I see now Kate's working in circles, so I'm not sure what to think about that yet. So, so at any rate, continuing to use that same paradigm. And so the structure, if you look, the idea of this particular piece is as if you could look through the earth and into the ant colony itself. And depending on how far away you are, you might see where the nodes that the ants create within their nest and so forth. So that's kind of the structure itself. And the interesting aspect of the structure of the ant is that not only are they using these interesting structures for their home and food and living and so forth, but there's a social structure that's really reinforced, with regard to the queen and the worker and then the soldier ants and so forth. So that kind of played, so both aspects of the physical structure of the ant nest as well as the social structure, the culture of the ants kind of played into both our work. So it was kind of interesting because we were kind of calling and responding to each other back and forth. So I'm not really sure who ended up being the caller and who was the responder, because we were kind of calling and responding to each other throughout the period. And so, and to answer an earlier question, that was very different in this experience than the previous experiences I've had in call and response. Before it was, we could get together over the summer. We could do a lot of discussion and so forth. And, you know, here we were kind of forced to work somewhat asynchronously, and that was just kind of interesting to try to get things done. But I think it was because of the fact that we had to work remotely, it allowed us both to kind of be a little more on our toes with regard to what we were communicating, how we were communicating, and it, you know, and so we had to kind of build a structure around our communication.
Exactly.
And so that was kind of an interesting experience.
Yeah, that's so great. Yeah, because when, you know, when my partner and I were responding to each other too, we couldn't always meet to actually talk. So we just sent each other our work. And then I think we would weirdly respond to each other's work without even telling the person, like, oh, I totally changed my piece. Like my piece changed like 3 days before I even put it up, and I forgot even to tell her. And I was like, oh, it's totally different now. So yeah, so, and we kind of encouraged that more this time too. And I think it worked out in this structure of virtual online, because exactly what you said, Mike. And kind of jumping off that point to Jorge, who I think really took the back and forth to like even like another level, right? You created a brand new piece with your poet, 3 new pieces with your poet. And I think we said we're going to show the video first and then you'll explain it afterwards.
Yep.
Okay.
My body is a home for what's lost. Cells and flesh and mess. It's all I have left. There isn't a place I can live except my own skin. There isn't a place that isn't marked with their sin. I don't know where to begin beyond a boned cage of a body enraged. They've left me dead, just like all the rest. Said it was for the better. They never knew that I was tethered, that I'm still bound to what they don't understand. My body, my land. I bend on my own demands. They should have considered me, the sea, fury and fed up with conquest. They should have considered me being me. I'd force my way back. I'd never let them rest.
Yes, that's so awesome. Can you talk more about how you made that?
Yeah, so my name is Jorge. I'm a third year MFA student, graduating next spring, hopefully. We actually did meet once, Danielle and I, and we talked about a lot of things. And she, because she's a spoken, she does poetry and also does like spoken word. I thought it would be great to do her voice with sounds or some kind of video, and we worked really well going back and forth online. I think because we're both used to, because she also does some recording. So when you're a musician and you record stuff, you're used to going back and forth online with files. So the overall idea of that piece was to use something called like a modular synth and make connections that when you use that kind of instrument, you never know what's going to happen. So you can make connections and make random sounds. So the sounds in that, they're just, basically random sounds that, I didn't know how it was going to turn out. And then also using another program called Max MSP that you can also make connections with different, it's like a programming language, kind of. And so behind all these videos, there are these connections and structures that kind of like hang over everything but are not seen. And so I think that's kind of like, that's the way that what we were trying to convey, even though we didn't really, I don't know, it was kind of like unspoken. It just came about like that. And then with her, awesome delivery of her poems to these sounds that don't make any sense, she kind of like put it all together. So that's how it came together.
Yeah, that was really interesting, and it was so good too that I know you had been working in this way, and you're a musician yourself. Jorge's in a band, but to be able to work with somebody too, and you got a good parent. I think Heather said that she knew that Danielle did the spoken word, so it was really great that you guys both made pieces like that. And to jump off that some more, are you planning on working with her on future pieces?
I don't know, because we haven't really talked about any of that, but that's something that could happen. Yeah, it's still open.
Yeah, opening up that question to everybody. Does anybody have any plans to keep working? Like, I know with my poet, I'm hoping to meet with her again a couple more times to keep collaborating, because it was so like inspirational. Like, how does everybody feel about that? Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, well, for me, I was paired with a former student.
That's right.
And I hadn't talked to her in a really long time. And so it was really nice to reconnect and to hear, what she's doing in the in her MFA creative writing program. And it was also nice to change the structure. The structure is no longer teacher and student, and it was a long time ago that I was her teacher anyway. And so it was just a nice opportunity to reconnect a friendship, and I'm sure we'll get together and maybe not collaborate on artwork. I don't know, although that's a possibility, but at least it'll be nice just to reconnect and get together.
Yeah, that's what Heather was just talking about that today, that she was a former student. So I hadn't heard that before. And her piece is really interesting. And it's like a long essay, actually. And we didn't know that until she sent it to us. So we actually printed out the first portion of it. And that's what you can see if you go to the exhibition in person. But if you want to read the rest of it, we printed out a QR code and it brings you to our website. So that's actually what we did with a lot of the pieces, especially the video pieces, Jessica's and Jorge's and Sam's piece. We attached QR codes so you can watch them on your phones if you want to, or view it on the website. Yeah, that's it worked out really well, actually, because it was a nice way to like direct you back to the website without it being a video. It was really interesting to actually have a poem online for the full experience. So so that was like kind of a cool discovery as we were working. I guess, I mean, yeah, that's mainly what I wanted to talk to you guys about. Let's see, do I have any other questions? Does anybody want to add anything? Carrie, I was going to ask you too. So you're an MFA also, and you work with education, right? You're going for your MAT also. And I was wondering, do you have any like extra insight, since you're also working with a different program too, like how, and you've talked about how they are dealing with educating online, and we have a few teachers here. Jane's a teacher, jumping off that last point, and Kate is also teaching. Do you guys have any advice or commentary on how education has changed online, and how kind of reflected in your piece?
I think learning how to be an educator online is fine. Like, I can talk with my professor and the other students, but what's really crazy is that we don't get to go and see what it's like to be in a school, so we don't get any of that like in-class experience anymore. So I think how that affects our learning, like, I can't imagine what it'll do when I'm actually a teacher and I won't have had any proper in-class experience. Kate, how have you, sorry, my cat is joining us now. Kate, how have you found teaching online to be?
Oh, I mean, I work for Arlington Public Schools, and we're fully virtual. We've been fully virtual that whole time, and now they're starting to consider bringing students back into schools at a very slow rate. I teach art online, and it's been a struggle. First off, my students don't have the supplies or the access that they would have coming into the school. So a lot of prep work was done to kind of like try to create art kits so students would have something at home. But I'm trying to consider all my students' needs. Some students have a really great space to do their education from, others don't. So it's really trying to consider what's available to my students at home. So a lot of the things that we're working on, strangely enough, don't follow traditional rules or structures of an art classroom. So there's not a lot of that happening. But what I am learning that my job is trying to kind of host, just like Andy is, like host this classroom online so that they can interact with each other. Because art is a social thing. In a classroom, we would all be sharing our ideas and looking over each other's shoulder and meeting with each other. And that's really hard to navigate. And that is a big, huge thing that is missing from that. But they are getting the hang of it. It's about creating kind of a safe space, creating routine, and then allowing them to kind of explore what they can do with the prompts and the lessons that I'm giving them.
Thanks, you guys. Yeah, I think we're all kind of navigating that, especially being grad students, and how do we successfully take class online and teach our own students. And yeah, it's just kind of, and that's at the collegiate level. Like the lower levels, I don't know how you guys are doing it. My kid is, I can't wait to send him back to school. But so we have a question from Natalie, and so this question is for Jane. I might have missed it, sorry, but I wanted to ask why you chose to paint all the panels black and then use sandpaper to essentially draw your painting. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I'm trying to remember my thought process when I started doing this. Before I started this piece, I did a portrait, which is kind of interesting because in this piece, obviously the faces are absent. I've chosen to not render those squares, and everything is shifted and dislocated. But I did do a portrait before this on a panel, and I did kind of a process, both an additive and a subtractive process, where I was painting and adding the paint to the panel, but then I was also wiping away. And I think that painting in a subtractive way is something that I just naturally do a lot when I paint. And I think part of it just stems from a project that I give my students that I got as a student when I was learning how to paint, where you make the entire painting by rubbing away. And we usually call it a rub out. So you paint on the surface and then you can only use a rag to rub away. And that's usually a kind of like breakthrough painting for my students. And it was a kind of breakthrough exercise when I did it as a student. And the reason that it's usually so important for a student painter's thought process is because it forces you to realize that everything is connected to everything else, that background is connected to foreground, figure is connected to ground. It changes the structure of the painting so that you're no longer relying on line, additive line. It's no longer linear. It is now completely different. It's a more holistic way of constructing an image, as opposed to, like I said, a linear kind of process. Linear, both literal and figurative. So yes, that's why.
Yay. Yeah, and I thought it was so interesting too, because Jane has been in her studio again, and I'm actually able to see things. And Natalie said, that's really cool. Thank you, Jane. Thanks, Natalie. But it was really interesting to see how you're working, how you connected pieces that you had done before and coming back from a break and getting back into your studio, and how do you start working again? And even, this piece is even, I feel like, miles away from what you're doing even now. So it's really interesting to kind of like have this little moment in time to, kind of, capture it a little bit. And I wonder if we'll all remember these pieces in this really bizarre time frame, right? Like when we look back, it's almost like a song. I don't know if anybody else does that, but like when I have a song that I listen to all the time and then I don't listen to it for a while and then I listen to it again, I remember that time, that experience of the time. I don't know. But kind of jumping off that too, like your process reminds me a little bit of like what Mike said about his piece and how he built his piece. Can you talk more about that, Mike?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because it's the same process, right? Where
yeah.
in the piece that I did is a charcoal on paper, and so the entire paper is literally covered in charcoal, and then I basically removed the layers and of the structure itself, just with a rag and so forth. And I'd have to touch it up here and there, but I mean it's the same exact process, except mine's a rag rather than sandpaper. I could probably use sandpaper to get right down to the paper. I didn't even think of that. So maybe next time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That it made me almost immediately think of that. Okay, so we have a lot of our poets here also, and I don't know if any of you all wanted to kind of chime in or had any questions to follow up with your partners, since I think a lot of our partners are here, like Danielle, and I see Marcello. I think that's how you pronounce it. Did you guys have anything to add to jump off of? Or I know we're going to do a poets panel with Heather in November, but if any of you guys wanted to add to the conversation, you know, just write us in the chat and we can add you. Or if anybody else had any extra questions. Is there anybody there? Rose said she had a really great time working with Carrie. It was particularly fun. I liked how to do the exchanges as a conversation. Yeah, we put a lot actually of Carrie's conversation. We had it and we put it actually on the website, which I really enjoyed, to be able to see that in context with the piece and the poems, which was really like nice to be able to see. Can you talk more about that, Carrie?
Yeah, I also loved working with Rose. I thought it was really great how, so we talked on the phone and I felt like we just had a lot of similar interests. And when we were talking about what we thought of structures, Rose said quilt, and I was like, oh, I'm doing fabric work right now. This is perfect. And so kind of before we even had the initial call and response, we had a framework for how we wanted, like how I was seeing my piece go, part of the work going. And so I thought that was a really neat way to collaborate, that we could kind of like brainstorm together where we wanted to take it and then watch the piece evolve with the back and forth. I had never done any kind of call and response before. So it was, yes, we had a mutual geek out about fabric. Fabric's just so exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't even realize too, like I forgot, like you had used fabric and like it was my first time printing on fabric. So like our pieces kind of talk to each other like in the space too, which is kind of nice. Like I forget, you know, it's weird to not see art in person for a while and then all of a sudden see it, like in Kate's show too, like it's not open to the public, but we have like, you know, been able to at least view it privately. And so it's just really nice to be able to remember that these things are like real, you know, because this feels so fake at times, right? This kind of virtual space and what is space and how does that even work anymore, right? Yeah, so does anybody have any other like comments about how the collaboration went? If any more, I think we had a couple people comment. Did Jessica comment on, I can't remember if we added your commentary on how well you work together. Stephanie's so good with that. Oh yeah, we had your awesome quotes too. And I think we talked about that. Oh, can I talk about my work? Oh, sure. Yeah, so mine, I forgot that I was even doing this. Mine is a big fabric piece, and I originally was going to do a video like Jessica and Jorge, but it ended up, Victoria sent me this first poem, and I actually made a completely other piece with all the same assets and the same figure, but I originally jumped off the bone structure idea. So I went for the rib cage, and specifically like the hummingbird gaze was the line that I like kind of picked out and I made like the whole scene from. And then when I sent her the original kind of first image of the other video that I was gonna do, she actually wrote the next poem, the poem on the bottom, and we kept missing each other, like doing the Zoom calls. So I didn't quite, we were supposed to meet weekly because I loved talking to her, and I think she explained my work really well, and I kind of wanted to like record her explaining my work so I could write it down and then use it to tell other people. But yeah, so she sent me back this poem, and it was fairly like close to when everything was due, but I loved it so much that I actually went back and redid the piece into like a vagina dentata. And I think it's because the poem talks about rebirth, and I just kind of thought like, oh my God, like that's where it was to begin with. And you kind of can't quite tell, but the rib cages or the pink kind of thing there is actually the pelvic bone. And then I added all the flowers and the vagina on top of it. And then I was going to just have it online, but kind of at the, yeah, Stephanie drew that on there. That's perfect. That's amazing. So yeah, so I was just gonna make a video, and I tried a bunch of kind of different things, but then kind of at the last second, I can't remember why, but somebody had I think Sue had told me I should look into printing something on fabric. And so I printed it on fabric, and then kind of at the same time, I was also working with Sue and Edgar about doing an augmented reality application. So actually, and I wanted to see if the fabric would trigger it. So actually, if you go see the piece in person, if you download the Artivive application and you just point it at the fabric piece, and the fabric piece, my piece is like 100 inches tall and 88 inches wide. If you use the app, and the app's really easy to download, you just point it at the app and it actually will start this video on your phone. So like that was kind of fun to do, and I definitely want to do more of that. And Natalie asked a question. I don't know if you already said it, but what made you want to create this piece? What was I inspired by? So I work a lot with like the idea of the female grotesque. So I do a lot of like vagina dentatas, and but it was mostly like Victoria's poem, and she said that she wanted to respond to one of the vagina pieces. I have a separate piece that kind of is just the figure and the dentata, but it was kind of interesting to combine the two, you know, the piece that I had done in response to her first poem, and then to combine that, all those assets into another piece that responded to her poem that responded to my piece. It was really interesting. Like, I think we were like Mike and basically, I think it sounds like everybody really went back and forth with the poet. And oh yeah, with the poet and the artist. It was really interesting. Yeah, Stephanie asked me too. So last year, my call and response actually had was a big painting, very similar, and that I had put arrows in. Actually, I had painted them in the painting, but my poet last year thought it would be fun if I actually, like, we were trying to make his poem interesting to display. And so we were trying out a couple things, but they didn't end up working. So at the last second, he said, like, why don't you just make an arrow and pin it to, like, the arrow hit the paper with the poem. So I actually made an arrow. And it's funny because, like, I had sculpted these arrows for like a different piece, and I just kind of imported them back into this piece. Which was really interesting because they have it's that same shape. I used the red arrow. I don't know why, but the red, I don't even know what those are called at the end, those things that stick out. But if I put this piece up to my old call and response piece, they're very similar aesthetically. So I found that really interesting, and I wasn't even like kind of thinking that way. So I don't know if anybody else had the same feeling. And Jessica, I know you said that you've done this several times. Have you noticed like a theme that you keep carrying with you every time, or is it totally different pieces?
I mean, I think it's totally different. It's totally different pieces because the partnering is different each time.
Yes.
And so I really try to give myself to getting immersed with the other artist or writer, and really try. I want to lose myself a little bit.
Yes.
Or find some kind of balance of enmeshment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be different. I hope it's going to be different each time. I think that's such a way that the call and response is such a spark for all of us, because it gives us this opportunity to look through a lens we might not look through, to even if we're just viewing our work, to look at it from a different angle or see it from a different artist or writer's perspective. And I think that helps us to keep, fleshing out what we're doing. It's a wonderful that call and response is here to help so many artists, especially so if you're getting stuck, or if we're in we're in quarantine, we're in lockdown, and we might get stuck more than ever because we're not like it's been said, interacting and working off one over another all the time. And so I think it's always different. I hope so.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's seems like that's been everybody's response this time, is that it creates like a motivation, because I think a lot of times, right, especially right now, we're having such a hard time staying motivated and inspired, and this was a good way to really kind of light the fire under most of us, I think, right? Keep it going. Did anybody else feel that way, like have a spark, kind of a spark of inspiration? Like Jorge, did you feel that way? Because I know you were getting frustrated there for a minute.
It was kind of like I really, for this project, I kind of just had no idea what was going to happen. So that really helps when you have no idea what is going to happen, and you just keep going. And then like everything, like for example, like the colors, like the red, white, and blue, I wasn't really thinking about that. It just came to me. And then because I wanted to make something with images, and when I made it very minimal, with just a color feel like that, and it just kind of, I don't know, I was like, oh yeah, that's it, and then I just went with it. I think the thing about this was that it kind of really just what is the word, like cemented the idea of just going with your instincts, and just keep going, and just keep going forward, and just don't expect anything, because I'm mainly a photographer, so I thought I was going to respond with or collaborate with photographs.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had no idea that I was going to use the Max MSP platform to do this, and I decided to do it like a week before the deadline. So I had this deadline that I had to do, and I had no idea what I was going to do. So and then another thing that helps, I think, is to like maybe talk to other people that are not involved in your project. And like, for example, like Matt Nolan kind of was very helpful in like distilling what, you know, he looked at it like in, you know, midpoint and was like, oh, do this, you know, and don't do that. And, you know, so that was kind of very helpful. So yeah, I think the main thing is, like I really allowed myself just to do something totally new that I had no idea what was going to happen. So
Exactly.
I mean, I did spend a lot of time on it though. You
Yeah.
know, like I spent a lot of hours working on this program and like recording this music and, you know, you know, going back and forth. And so, and then, you know, I know Danielle she wrote 3 new poems, you know, so there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of thought and work into it, but at the same time, I feel like it was very spontaneous.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. And I think it turned out so good. And the other thing too, and Stephanie and I talked about too, because I know you wanted, this would be better displayed with like actual dedicated monitors or like large projectors. Can you describe if you could display it any way you wanted to, how would it be? Because obviously Fenwick is very limited how we physically display things.
Well, I was kind of messing with you guys. I was like, you know, shooting for the moon. I was like, let's see what I can like think of like the most amazing thing. So,
I know we were like, that would be really nice, Jorge, but we only have this.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't gonna happen, but so yeah, like, you know, of course I imagine it, you know, like a really huge display. You know, you walk into a room and you see this huge screen, you know. And then something interesting that Sue Werbican mentioned was how she saw it in the dark with her phone and how like, you know, I didn't really think about that, how it would translate into like a smaller device. And so, you know, things that you don't even think about, like how, you know, I was thinking about it really big, you know, but at the same time it could be really small, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about Sue did a really great job, or Sue really put me and Jorge kind of where she was at when she was like, I just watched it on the phone and it was really dark, and I was like, yes, like that's the beauty of kind of this being online is and the, you know, our smartphones, unfortunately we're addicted to them, but at least they have some pluses that you can bring art with you and have fun with it. So well, I think if anybody had, oh yeah, Mike says it would be cool to see it in a theater and letting the color kind of flood the space. And I noticed too, like if it's red and we're having like a Zoom meeting, everybody's faces turn like bright red. I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but it's pretty funny.
It freaked me out though. I was like, I need to minimize the screen.
It's pretty good. Yeah, see, ooh. Like I mean, if you're dark, if you have it dark, like my space is dark, it turns everybody's face bright red. Yeah, I should turn this off and then it would be even better. But yeah, because lighting, we're so limited with lighting at Fenwick, so we've discussed that at length. What would we'd like to do and what we versus what we can do, but.
And I will say to Jorge, sorry, I'll cut in too.
Yes.
We want people to do that. We want
yes.
that push what we can do in the space. We
exactly.
won't necessarily be able to, but it gives us like, it lets us think like, okay, if we could go wild, what could we do here?
Yes.
And we can ask and try.
I think that's it's a good exercise too.
Mm-hmm.
Play around. Okay, well, just to kind of wrap up, thank you guys so much for all your work. And I think the show is like so amazing and kind of better than I even like dreamed it could be. And it looks both equally great online and in person. And if anybody else has any questions, you know, ask them now. Can we get into the library? You can. You can go to the library. It is open. You just have to, follow all the safe procedures. We need masks and social distancing, but it is open. The library stack, Fenwick is open to students. You just can't get into the stacks. So if you need to check out a book, you just go, you reserve it online and then you pick it up. But I think the tables, and I've seen tables of students studying, and there's computers open still that you can go use. So the library is physically there to use. So I think I've told a lot of people it's in there, and then they don't even know that they can go look at it in person. It's like, I don't know. Yeah. So if anybody else, does anybody else have any questions? Anybody else have anything to say? Carrie's cat is very cute.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
Jessica, is that original music?
Oh, no, it's not. It's not necessarily original music. I think with everything that I'm doing, it's collage. And so I do like to say everything's stolen and then manipulated.
Okay.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, do you guys have any more questions for each other? We got like 5 minutes technically.
Well, I see that some of the people are signing off. So if we lose everyone, I'm just going to give a reminder of our next event on November 17th. And this exhibition is up online until December 18th, and it will be in Fenwick as well if you want to go visit in person. And I also need, I totally whiffed on this at the beginning, but I need to give a shout out to Fall for the Book. So this event is usually produced in coordination during the Fall for the Book Festival. We're on their calendar, we're on their roster. We get really great attendance from people who are coming to the Fall for the Book Festival. So thank you to them for their ongoing support and coordination of this. And earlier in the room, I think she's left now, but Susan Tishy, who was one of the original founders of the Call and Response program, alongside, oh my gosh, Helen Frederick from the School of Art, both now professors emerita from creative writing and School of Art, respectively. But Susan was here earlier. I think we missed her, but I will still give a thanks to her for starting this, this great collaborative endeavor. And is Heather in the room? Does Heather want to say anything? Am I putting you on the spot, Heather? You can send a chat. Oh, I can unmute you. I didn't know who you were. There you go. All right, Heather, you're unmuted.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks a lot. It was wonderful to hear so much more about the process and the collaborations. And also the writers reading in panel are November 17th at 7:30 p.m. And by the way, since I was the host of the event, I couldn't log on but remain like invisible without using someone else's account. Thus the picture of my mom with Cookie Monster.
That's great.
Okay. Thank you so much, Andy, though. That was really wonderful.
Well, thank you. Thanks for letting me do that. I love it. So fun. Thank you all for coming. I love having an excuse to talk to you all. Anytime.
Thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone who came out tonight and joined us. We really do look forward to seeing everyone in person again at this. This is usually one of my favorite events of the year, is to do this. And so it's very sad, but we'll be together again soon. Next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop the video.